This question has always been stuck in my head. And most Filipina, Filipinos, and Filipinx who are born and raised in Canada also ask this question. Am I Filipino enough? Most immigrant parents probably ask themselves this too. Am I Canadian enough? Last year, I was going through it. I was trying to ask myself this question, where am I actually from? Having this identity crisis. I always find myself in a difficult situation when I try to look for my own community. I decided to create the Filipino Student Association Club at Humber College, Lakeshore. It would help me understand my community and to know other people's perspective on what it means to be Filipino. I invited my executive members, Vicky and Chris, to discuss our Filipino identity.
In 2022, around like December, November, I'm really good friends with the president of FSA currently. She came up to me and she asked me, did you want to start a club? And I'm like, oh, what type of club would it be? And she was like, oh, it's like a Filipino Student Association Club. And I feel like almost a fake Filipino because, I mean, yeah, I am Filipino, but also I have like different, I wouldn't say like a different identity, but I have different experiences being a Filipino, like, than Chris, who's grown up in the Philippines. So, like, most of the things that I know are different than people that are, like, I guess, authentic Filipinos.
Yeah, we don't learn being Filipino by, I guess,
Books
by
and,
books
like,
and by like the histories. 'Cause, like,
yeah,
that's one thing, but
Yeah.
I think we learn through our shared experiences.
yeah, within
Like
each
my
other.
experience, your experience.
And I just thought that it'd be really good to, like, have a club within that and, like, have people with similar experiences together.
Being Filipino, it's a very, we have different, our identities are what we make it pretty much. Because like, I mean, even the Filipinos in the Philippines is a mixture of different cultures.
Chris is right. Filipinos are a mix of different cultures and ethnicity. There were many merchants from different countries bringing their spices and trades. Unfortunately, the Philippines was colonized by 3 different countries. First, the Spaniards stole our land in 1565, bringing their culture, people, and religion to our country. Then we asked the United States for help in 1898, but tricked Filipinos and ended up being imperialized until 1942, when the Japanese occupied the Philippines until 1945. For the club, we had to find an in-between, following the traditional and modern culture of the Philippines.
FSA is like a mix of both traditional and modern. Traditional, like during Christmas, we did the parol, so that's like very traditional Filipino things. But we also talk about like a lot of modern things, like our modern like issues, like modern struggles that we go through, especially like the things that we go through with our daily day-to-day lives. Because like some of us have immigrated here, and then we deal with like being the first generation Filipinos here in Canada.
We are going to touch on the topic of, am I Filipino enough now, or am I Canadian enough? Because as I now have lived here like for 10 years, I guess, whenever I visit the Philippines, I tend to be, I guess, different now to the other people. I still do speak the language, but sometimes there are the accent nuances that would come out.
Where I grew up in like Scarborough, there's a lot of like Filipino culture there. So I grew up all around a lot of like Filipino people. So I feel like I wasn't like too lost in touch with my Filipino background, I guess. But there was definitely times where I felt like, oh, I'm not Filipino enough for this.
But sometimes people, they tend to get embarrassed of being associated with this other Filipino folks around, because like they don't want to be seen as they're only associating themselves with just the Filipino folks.
Honestly, I can also relate to the embarrassment part.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I'm embarrassed about being Filipino. It's just like, I don't know, sometimes when you start something up and you have like other friends, they're like, they look at you like, oh, you're starting a Filipino club, but you're like not really like that Filipino. And it's like, yeah, I understand that, but also like, I want to be around other Filipinos, I guess. I feel like I have learned a lot from other members about like my Filipino identity. Like there's other members I know at North Campus that are also like they don't feel Filipino enough. So it's, I guess, comforting to know that I'm not alone in that aspect, because a lot of people, they have their struggles, but they don't say it. And I feel like that also goes a lot with like Filipino people, because we don't really talk about our emotions or anything. We kind of just like, hey, how are you? And it's always like, good, I'm okay. And we don't like really expand on that. Filipinos that have like come here that are my age and they don't look Filipino anymore. They've completely
Yeah.
transitioned into a complete culture that's like, I don't recognize you anymore. You don't speak the language anymore. You don't look Filipino anymore. And it's almost like they're hiding themselves.
Yeah. And I realized that that is not the life that I want. I wanted to grow out of that. And I mean, being a graduate in the Philippines, like, I'm like, I want to pursue what I was actually wanting to do. That's why here I am, like, go back to school. I am studying accounting, pursuing my CPA, and thankfully, I'm glad that my parents are actually very, very supportive of that too. So I guess it's a matter of finding that support from people around you.
There's always like, whenever there's a new club growing, obviously you want to be inclusive to everyone. You don't want to leave anyone out. So like FSA strives to be like inclusive to everyone, not just Filipino people.
Definitely. Like, I mean, me being gay, growing up in the Philippines, I was in the closet most of my life there in the Philippines, because it's not accepted. Sure, it's tolerated, but not accepted. Tolerance and acceptance are two different things. And I think it's important to have that representation in FSA, or us as a representative of the community, just so like there are more people who are able to be themselves. I'm hoping that we grow in numbers, not only of allies and people who are very curious about the culture, but I hope that we grow with more Filipinos that will join and share their experiences.
Defining Filipino, I feel like it's more of your personality, because like Filipinos, we're very welcoming. We're very community based. We love being together with people. We also just want to keep the culture alive. We're very family oriented.
Yes.
So like I feel like once that's gone, like once people start to lose that sense of family, then that's when like we're slowly like dying away. Despite not being like DNA,
From the same,
yeah,
I guess.
we're like, we still feel like close.
It's a community. It's pakipagkapwa tao, the togetherness, the bayanihan, the collaboration between us. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to mean that we're from the same family tree. It's enough that we're from the same, or our families are from the same country. And with that, that's a click, and that's us. That's Filipino right there.
When I met other Filipinos and Filipino students at Humber, I realized that I share almost the same experience as my club members. My favorite psychologist, Carl Lorenz Cervantes, explained that pagkikisa means sharing in oneness, so sharing in self. If we combine that word with kapwa, pagkikipagkapwa, which translates to each individual is an extension of self. We may have different experience, but we communicate our stories to other people by participating in the shared humanity.